Our story begins not in the grand temples or the towering pyramids of Egypt, but rather in the fertile, life-giving waters of the Nile River. For thousands of years, this river would serve as a lifeblood of Egypt, shaping its destiny and transforming it into one of the world's most iconic civilizations. Egypt, often called the gift of the Nile, owes its very existence to this mighty river. Flowing northward from Central Africa, the Nile stretches over 4,000 miles, creating a green ribbon of life amidst the barren desert that flanks it on both sides. The river's annual flooding brought rich, nutrient-laden silt to the land, making the soil fertile and ideal for agriculture. This abundance allowed early human settlements to thrive, laying the groundwork for Egypt's rise. Long before the rise of the great pharaohs, humans in Egypt were already making their mark on the land. Evidence of early human activity in Egypt dates back to the Paleolithic period, over 100,000 years ago. Archaeological discoveries show that ancient Egyptians, long before they were unified under one ruler, lived in small groups, hunting and gathering along the riverbanks. As the climate of the Sahara began to change, the once lush grasslands gradually turned to desert, and the Nile River became an even more vital resource. It was during this time, around 10,000 BCE, that early humans began to settle along its banks, forming small communities. These communities, scattered across Egypt, were united by a dependence on the river for water, food, and transport. By around 6,000 BCE, the people of Egypt began to develop agriculture. They learned how to cultivate crops like wheat, barley, and flax, which provided the foundation for their civilization. Domesticated animals like cattle, sheep, and goats were raised for meat, milk, and leather, transforming Egyptian society into one that could support larger and more permanent populations. With agriculture came the need for tools, and the people of ancient Egypt developed some of the earliest agricultural implements. The sickle, used to harvest crops, and grinding stones for grain are among the artifacts that offer a glimpse into the early technological advances of the Egyptians. Trade also played a crucial role in Egypt's early development. The people of the Nile traded with neighboring regions, including Nubia to the south and the Levant to the northeast. This exchange of goods, such as ivory, gold, and pottery, helped stimulate cultural interaction and economic growth. As Egypt's early societies grew in complexity, so did their religious beliefs. The people began to bury their dead in simple graves, but by 1400 BCE, we see the first signs of more elaborate burial practices. Burial goods, pottery, and personal items were placed with the deceased, suggesting a belief in an afterlife, a belief that would become central to Egyptian religion. By 3100 BCE, Egypt had begun to emerge from its primitive state into a land of organized kingdoms. The geography of Egypt, with its natural borders, deserts to the east and west, and the Nile to the south and north, encouraged the formation of distinct regions and cultures. Upper Egypt, the southern part of the country, was characterized by narrow, rocky valleys and mountainous terrain, while Lower Egypt, the northern part, was a lush delta at the mouth of the Nile. During the pre-dynastic period, Egypt was divided into several small, competing chiefdoms, each with its own local rulers. The most powerful of these rulers eventually rose to dominance, and by around 3100 BCE, one leader, King Nama, managed to unite Upper and Lower Egypt. This marked the beginning of the first dynasty and the foundation of ancient Egypt as a unified kingdom. King Nama, also known as Mens, is often credited with uniting the two regions of Egypt. His military conquests and political alliances brought peace and stability, and he established the capital at Memphis, strategically located at the apex of the Nile Delta. The famous Nama palette, a ceremonial stone tablet, depicts him as a powerful figure who symbolically unites the two lands. One side shows him wearing the crown of Upper Egypt, while the other depicts him wearing the crown of Lower Egypt. Under Nama's rule, Egypt began to transform from a collection of tribal societies into a centralized state governed by a powerful leader, the pharaoh. The concept of kingship was sacred, and the pharaoh was considered a living god, a divine ruler tasked with maintaining order, or ma'at, in the world. This idea of divine kingship would endure throughout Egypt's entire history. As Egypt moved towards a more centralized government, it also saw the development of writing. The early form of hieroglyphs, a pictorial script used for religious texts and monumental inscriptions, began to take shape. This system of writing would eventually become one of the most sophisticated in the ancient world, used to record everything from royal decrees to religious rituals. Religion played a central role in the early kingdoms of Egypt. The early Egyptians worshipped a variety of gods and goddesses, each representing different aspects of life and nature. The most important deities were associated with the elements of the Nile, such as Hapi, the god of the inundation, and Osiris, the god of the afterlife. By the time of unification, Egypt had already developed a rich cultural and artistic tradition. Pre-dynastic pottery, jewelry, and figurines reveal a society that valued beauty, craftsmanship, and symbolism. These early works were not only utilitarian objects, but also held religious and social significance. Society in early Egypt was structured hierarchically, with a pharaoh at the top as a ruler and divine intermediary. Below him were the nobles and priests, who helped govern and maintain the temples. Scribes, who were educated in the complex art of writing, held a special place in society as record keepers and advisors. Below them were artisans, farmers, and laborers who made up the bulk of the population. As Egypt's agricultural practices evolved, so did its settlements. The transition from nomadic lifestyles to permanent, planned villages marked a turning point in Egyptian civilization. Villages were often built near the Nile for access to water, and their social organization centered around the needs of the community. As we've seen, the story of Egypt's origins is one of adaptation, resilience, and innovation. From the fertile banks of the Nile to the unification of Upper and Lower Egypt under King Nama, the foundations of Egyptian civilization were laid. It was a civilization that would rise to magnificent heights, building the pyramids, developing an unparalleled artistic tradition, and creating a legacy that would endure for millennia. Chapter 2. The Rise of the Pharaohs. Following the unification of Upper and Lower Egypt under the first king, Nama, the stage was set for one of the greatest civilizations the world would ever know. This chapter marks the dawn of the Egyptian monarchy, the era of the first pharaohs, and the establishment of a legacy that would span thousands of years. Hey, the pharaohs were not just rulers, but divine figures who embodied the will of the gods and upheld the order of the universe, Ma'at. King Nama, also known as Mens, is widely regarded as the first pharaoh of Egypt, uniting the two kingdoms of Upper and Lower Egypt into one cohesive entity around 3100 BCE. The transition from scattered chiefdoms to a unified kingdom marked the beginning of Egypt's dynastic history. The creation of the first dynasty established a royal lineage that would continue for over 3,000 years. Nama's legacy is symbolized by the famous Nama palette, which shows his victory and consolidation of power. His reign was pivotal in setting the precedent for the role of the pharaoh, not only as a political ruler, but as a divine figure responsible for maintaining balance in the world. After Nama, the first dynasty witnessed a series of powerful and ambitious rulers who built tombs in the sacred burial grounds of Abydos. The tombs of the early pharaohs reflect both their wealth and the belief in an afterlife that would continue for eternity. These kings established a tradition of monumental tomb building, a practice that would evolve into the grand pyramids of the Old Kingdom. Central to Egyptian kingship was a belief that the pharaoh was not simply a mortal leader, but the living embodiment of Horus, the god of the sky. The pharaoh's authority was divinely ordained, and his reign was seen as essential for the maintenance of cosmic order. The king was not only a political leader, but also the high priest, tasked with maintaining the favor of the gods. Through religious ceremonies and rituals, the pharaoh would communicate with the gods, ensuring prosperity and harmony. The power of the pharaoh extended beyond politics. He was responsible for the Nile flooding, the fertility of the land, and the prosperity of the people. The pharaoh's divine status was symbolized by his crown, a combination of the white crown of Upper Egypt and the red crown of Lower Egypt. His role as a unifier of the land and his connection to the gods solidified his absolute power. It was under this framework that Egypt would flourish. With the establishment of divine kingship came the desire for eternal remembrance. The pharaohs sought to ensure their legacy not just through their reigns, but through monumental architecture that would stand the test of time. This ambition was first realized during the Third Dynasty under Pharaoh Dosa, who commissioned the first pyramid in Egypt, the Step Pyramid at Saqqara. The Step Pyramid, designed by the architect Imhotep, was a revolutionary leap in architectural and engineering innovation. Constructed as a series of 6 step layers, it represented a significant departure from earlier tombs, which had been simple mastabas. The pyramid was a symbol of the pharaoh's divine connection to the gods, as it was believed that the shape of the pyramid would help the king ascend to the heavens and join the gods in the afterlife. This architectural tradition culminated during the 4th dynasty with the construction of the Great Pyramids of Giza. Pharaohs Khufu, Khafra, and Menkaure oversaw the building of these massive tombs, which are still considered one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world. Although the pharaohs wielded absolute power, they were not alone in their rule. The administration of Egypt required a complex system of officials, priests, and scribes to maintain order, keep records, and ensure that the kingdom ran smoothly. At the heart of Egypt bureaucracy were the scribes, men and women highly trained in the art of writing. They used a system of hieroglyphs that was both artistic and functional, recording everything from royal decrees to trade transactions. Scribes were among the most educated individuals in ancient Egyptian society and held positions of great importance. The priests, too, played a critical role in maintaining the kingdom's stability. They were responsible for performing rituals in the temples, ensuring that the gods were appeased and that Egypt's prosperity continued. The priesthood was a powerful institution, closely linked to the pharaoh, and it controlled vast amounts of wealth, land, and resources. Governors and nobles, who were often members of the royal family or high-ranking officials, were tasked with overseeing Egypt's provinces. They were responsible for managing the local economy, ensuring that taxes were collected, and organizing the defense of the kingdom. These individuals were the backbone of the pharaoh's power and ensured the smooth functioning of Egypt's vast and diverse territories. Egypt's rise to power was not only built on military might and monumental architecture, but also on trade. The kingdom's strategic location along the Nile and its access to the Mediterranean Sea allowed Egypt to engage in long-distance trade with neighboring civilizations. Goods such as gold, papyrus, linen, and glass were traded with the peoples of Mesopotamia, the Levant, Nubia, and even as far as the Indus Valley. Trade was not only essential for economic growth, but also for cultural exchange. Through trade, Egypt gained access to luxury items like incense, ivory, and precious stones. The exchange of goods and ideas helped to shape Egypt's artistic traditions, religious beliefs, and technological advancements. Egypt also established diplomatic ties with other powerful kingdoms. Marriages between Egyptian pharaohs and foreign princesses were common, strengthening political alliances and securing peace. These diplomatic relationships played a vital role in maintaining Egypt's status as a major power in the ancient world. As Egypt's old kingdom flourished, its centralized power began to show signs of strain. Towards the end of the 6th dynasty, the pharaohs faced increasing internal unrest. Famine, economic hardship, and a weakening of royal authority led to a breakdown in the administrative system. Regional governors, once loyal to the pharaoh, began to assert their independence, leading to the fragmentation of Egypt into competing provinces. This period of instability led to what is known as the First Intermediate Period, a time of political fragmentation and social upheaval. The centralized power of the pharaohs diminished, and Egypt entered a phase of decline, marked by civil strife and uncertainty. However, even in these troubled times, the cultural and religious traditions of Egypt would continue to influence the people, setting the stage for a resurgence in the form of the Middle Kingdom. The rise of the pharaohs set the stage for the creation of one of the world's most enduring and influential civilizations. From the establishment of the divine kingship to construction of monumental pyramids, the first pharaohs of Egypt left behind a legacy that continues to captivate the world to this day. Despite periods of turmoil and decline, their culture, art, and religious beliefs would forever shape the history of Egypt and the ancient world. Chapter 3. The Middle Kingdom. After the fragmentation and turmoil of the First Intermediate Period, Egypt faced a dramatic resurgence. This chapter is dedicated to the Middle Kingdom, a time of revitalization that saw the re-establishment of centralized power, economic prosperity, and a renaissance in art and culture. It was a period that would bring Egypt back into its former glory. Before we dive into the triumphs of the Middle Kingdom, it's important to understand the context that set the stage for this remarkable revival. Following the decline of the Old Kingdom, Egypt fell into a state of disarray. The pharaoh's power weakened, and regional leaders, often nobles and governors, gained increasing independence. This period, known as the First Intermediate Period, was marked by civil unrest, famine, and instability. Egypt was fractured, and its once stable administration crumbled. While this period was filled with chaos, it also marked a critical moment for Egypt's evolution. As the centralized authority of the Old Kingdom disintegrated, Egypt began to experience a slow but steady transformation that would eventually lead to the rise of the Middle Kingdom. The Middle Kingdom officially began with the reunification of Egypt by Pharaoh Mentuhotep II of the 11th dynasty. Mentuhotep II, often referred to as a restorer of Egypt, succeeded in ending the political fragmentation that had plagued the country for over a century. His reign marked the end of the first intermediate period, and through his military and diplomatic efforts, Egypt was once again united. Mentuhotep II's reign was one of stabilization. His ability to defeat rival factions and consolidate power was seen as a divine act, and he was celebrated for his wisdom and strength. He restored order by re-establishing the central authority of the Pharaohs, reclaiming control over the provinces, and reinforcing Egypt's unity. Mentuhotep II's tomb at Deir el-Bahari in the Valley of the Kings is an architectural marvel, symbolizing both his divine authority and his desire for eternal life. It's a reflection of the era's belief in immortality, where the pharaohs sought to ensure their legacies would live on forever. Mentuhotep II's reign also saw important political and administrative reforms that strengthened the central government. He restructured the provincial system, ensuring that governors were loyal to the pharaoh and that taxes were collected efficiently. The bureaucratic system was streamlined, with scribes and officials being employed to maintain order and oversee the activities of local communities. Under Mentuhotep II's leadership, the role of the governor was crucial. He sought to appoint trustworthy and capable individuals to oversee regions, and in turn, they would report directly to the pharaoh. This system of checks and balances helped to avoid the decentralization that had previously led to the collapse of central authority. Mentuhotep II's military successes also contributed to the stability of his reign. Through both warfare and diplomacy, he expanded Egypt's territory and secured trade routes, especially in the south toward Nubia. He also made alliances with powerful neighbors, ensuring Egypt's influence in the broader Near East. With the return of stability came a cultural renaissance. The Middle Kingdom witnessed a flourishing of art, literature, and architecture. The pharaohs and elite classes supported artists, who created masterpieces that depicted both the daily life of Egyptians and their religious beliefs. Art in the Middle Kingdom became more realistic, with depictions of people, animals, and landscapes that reflected the true nature of life in Egypt. Unlike the idealized images of earlier periods, these works were grounded in the realities of daily life, offering a glimpse into the lives of the common people. Literature also flourished during this time. The Middle Kingdom is known for the creation of some of Egypt's greatest literary works. The story of Sinew, for example, is one of the earliest known works of literature in the world. It tells the tale of an official who flees Egypt and later returns to find his homeland in turmoil, reflecting themes of exile, loyalty, and the fate of individuals in times of political change. The Middle Kingdom also marked a high point in Egyptian architecture. Pharaohs of the 12th dynasty, including Amenemhat I and Senusret I, oversaw the construction of impressive temples, pyramids, and other monumental structures. The Pyramid of Amenemhat II, located in Dasha, was one of the first to feature a smooth-sided design, indicating a shift in architectural preferences. The development of these structures during this time reflected the belief in the afterlife and the divine nature of the pharaoh. Temples dedicated to gods like Amunet Karnak and Luxor were also constructed, which would later become some of Egypt's most iconic religious sites. Alongside architectural advancements, the Middle Kingdom saw the rise of colossal statues and sculptures. These were not only symbolic of the pharaoh's power, but also served as a constant reminder of his divine authority and connection to the gods. During the Middle Kingdom, Egypt was once again a major military power. Pharaohs like Senusret I and Amenemhat II launched campaigns into Nubia to secure Egypt's southern borders, ensuring a steady flow of gold, ivory, and other valuable resources. These military actions were not only meant to expand Egypt's territory, but also to protect its wealth and ensure control over vital trade routes. The Egyptian military was well-trained, and the pharaohs often led their armies into battle. Military prowess was viewed as a critical aspect of a pharaoh's reign, and successful campaigns increased their prestige and solidified their divine status. The Middle Kingdom also saw the strengthening of Egypt's diplomatic relations with neighboring kingdoms, including those in the Levant and Nubia. Trade continued to play a vital role in Egypt's prosperity during the Middle Kingdom. The country's strategic location along the Nile allowed it to engage in trade with neighboring regions, including Mesopotamia, the Levant, and Nubia. The Middle Kingdom is known for its expansion of trade networks, and Egypt's merchants were active in importing luxury goods like incense, lapis lazuli, and timber from distant lands. Internally, Egypt thrived thanks to its agricultural base, with the fertile banks of the Nile providing the resources necessary to feed a growing population. The government worked to organize the agricultural economy, and large grain stores were established to ensure food security during times of famine or poor harvests. Despite its successes, the Middle Kingdom did not last forever. By the end of the 12th dynasty, the central authority of the Pharaohs began to weaken. The cause of this decline is often attributed to a combination of internal strife, military overreach, and a weakened royal family. As the power of the Pharaohs waned, local rulers in the provinces began to assert their own independence. The disunity that followed led to the eventual collapse of the Middle Kingdom and the start of the Second Intermediate Period, a time of instability and foreign invasion, particularly by the Hyksos. The Middle Kingdom was a time of renewal for Egypt. It was a period marked by stability, cultural flourishing, and the re-establishment of centralized power. Although it eventually gave way to a new era of turmoil, the Middle Kingdom's achievements in art, literature, and architecture left an indelible mark on Egyptian civilization. The legacy of this golden age would influence not only the rest of Egyptian history, but also the cultures of the ancient world. Chapter 4: The Second Intermediate Period and the Rise of the New Kingdom. As Egypt's golden age under the Middle Kingdom began to fade, the nation was thrust into another period of uncertainty and fragmentation. This chapter takes us through the Second Intermediate Period, a time of political disarray and foreign invasion, leading into the rise of the New Kingdom, which would usher in Egypt's most powerful and influential era. By the end of the 12th dynasty, the central authority of the Pharaohs began to erode. Internal instability, likely exacerbated by economic pressures, administrative corruption, and weak leadership, marked the decline of the Middle Kingdom. The Pharaohs of the 12th dynasty were unable to maintain the power and control once exerted by earlier rulers, and this led to a fragmentation of authority. Local governors, once loyal to the Pharaohs, began to assert greater independence, and Egypt's unity began to crumble. The situation worsened when the central government was weakened, and regional rulers grew increasingly powerful, often undermining the authority of the Pharaohs. As if Egypt's internal fragmentation wasn't enough, the country was soon faced with foreign invasion from the Hyksos, a people of Semitic origin from the Near East. The Hyksos are believed to have migrated into Egypt during the 13th dynasty, gradually taking control of the eastern Nile Delta. The Hyksos brought with them advanced military technology, including horse-drawn chariots and powerful composite bows, which gave them a significant advantage over the Egyptian forces. Their superior military tactics allowed them to quickly conquer and establish their own rule in the Delta, where they founded the 15th dynasty. The Hyksos established their capital in Avaris, located in the eastern Delta. Over time, they expanded their territory, further encroaching into Egypt's traditional heartlands. For over a century, the Hyksos ruled much of northern Egypt, including parts of the fertile Nile Delta. Although they were able to maintain their dominance for some time, the Hyksos were never fully accepted by the native Egyptian population. Resistance movements began to emerge, particularly in the south, where native Egyptian rulers, including the Ban kings, started to gather strength and prepare to reclaim Egypt. The Egyptians were not willing to remain under foreign rule. In the south, the Theban rulers, who were part of the 17th dynasty, began to consolidate power. These rulers were determined to expel the Hyksos from Egypt and restore native rule. One of the most significant figures during this time was Pharaoh Kamose of the 17th dynasty. Kamose led a military campaign against the Hyksos, pushing them back and re-establishing Egyptian control over parts of the Delta. Although Kamose was not able to completely expel the Hyksos in his lifetime, his efforts laid the groundwork for the subsequent military successes that would drive them out. Kamose's brother, Pharaoh Ahmose I, would eventually succeed in completing what his brother had started. Ahmose launched a series of successful campaigns against the Hyksos, culminating in the siege and capture of Avaris. After a series of bloody battles, the Hyksos were expelled from Egypt, marking the end of the Second Intermediate Period and the restoration of native Egyptian rule. With the expulsion of the Hyksos, Egypt was finally unified once more under the authority of a native pharaoh. This victory was not only a military triumph, but also a cultural and psychological victory for Egypt, reaffirming its identity and power as a unified nation. Ahmose-I's victory over the Hyksos is often regarded as a founding event of the New Kingdom, the period in Egyptian history that will become the height of Egyptian power and influence. With the reunification of Egypt, Ahmose-I set the stage for the New Kingdom, a time of unprecedented military, economic, and cultural achievement. Under Ahmose-I, Egypt expanded its borders significantly. The pharaohs of the New Kingdom, unlike those of earlier periods, sought to establish Egypt as a powerful empire, reaching into territories beyond the Nile Valley, including Nubia to the south, Syria to the north, and the Levant to the east. The military campaigns during this time were intense and far-reaching. Pharaohs like Thutmose-I and Thutmose III expanded Egypt's influence into Syria and Mesopotamia, while Pharaoh Amenhotep II strengthened Egyptian control over Nubia, securing the flow of vital resources like gold. The New Kingdom is perhaps best known for its monumental construction projects, many of which were commissioned by the pharaohs to glorify their reigns and ensure their immortality. Temples, tombs, and statues were built on an unprecedented scale, with the Valley of the Kings becoming the burial site for many of Egypt's greatest rulers. The construction of the Temple of Karnak, under the reign of Pharaoh Amenhotep III and his successors, would become one of Egypt's most impressive architectural achievements. The massive temples dedicated to the gods and the grandiose structures built in honor of the pharaohs were designed to immortalize both their rule and the divine nature of their reign. Religion played a central role in the New Kingdom. The pharaoh was not only a political leader but also a divine figure, the living god on earth. The worship of Amun-Ra, the sun god, became particularly prominent during the reigns of powerful pharaohs like Thutmose III and Akhenaten, whose reign marked significant shifts in Egypt's religious landscape. Perhaps one of the most dramatic religious changes came with Pharaoh Akhenaten, who attempted to replace the traditional polytheistic beliefs with the worship of a single god, Aten, the sun disk. Akhenaten's religious reforms sparked controversy and division, but his legacy would remain one of the most discussed and debated chapters in Egyptian history. The expulsion of the Hyksos not only restored Egypt's political unity, but also solidified a sense of national pride and identity. The Hyksos were seen as the ultimate foreign invaders, and their expulsion marked a clear boundary between Egypt's native rulers and foreign oppressors. The events of this period shaped Egyptian memory, and the pharaohs of the New Kingdom often referred to their military victories over the Hyksos as a symbol of their strength and divine favor. The rise of the New Kingdom ushered in an era of Egyptian dominance and grandeur, laying the foundation for some of the most legendary rulers in history. The legacy of Ahmose-I's victory over the Hyksos would continue to shape Egyptian culture and politics for centuries to come, as Egypt became an empire unlike any the ancient world had ever seen. Chapter 5. The New Kingdom, the Rise of Egypt's Empire. The New Kingdom marked the apex of ancient Egypt's power and grandeur. It was an era characterized by monumental achievements in military conquest, culture, and religion. The pharaohs of this time not only unified Egypt, but also expanded its boundaries into an empire that stretched from the Nile Valley to the Nees, Nubia, and beyond. The New Kingdom began with the reign of Ahmose-I, who successfully expelled the Hyksos from Egypt and reunified the land. With Egypt restored, Ahmose-I laid the foundation for a powerful empire. This marked the beginning of the 18th dynasty, which would go on to produce some of Egypt's most famous and revered rulers. Under the pharaohs of the New Kingdom, Egypt expanded far beyond its traditional borders. The desire for wealth, security, and political dominance drove military campaigns to secure control over regions such as Nubia, the Levant, and parts of Syria. The expansion of Egypt's empire would redefine its place in the ancient world. Thutmose-I, the second pharaoh of the 18th dynasty, is often credited with solidifying Egypt's military power. His campaigns in Nubia brought Egypt vast amounts of gold, cementing Egypt's economic strength. Thutmose-I's reign also saw the strengthening of Egypt's influence in the Levant, securing vital trade routes and resources. Thutmose II, his son, continued his father's legacy by extending Egypt's power. Though Thutmose II's reign was shorter, it was still marked by military victories, which helped pave the way for his successor, Thutmose III. Often referred to as a Napoleon of Egypt, Thutmose III was one of Egypt's greatest pharaohs. His military prowess was unparalleled, and his reign is marked by a series of successful campaigns in the Levant, particularly in the Battle of Megiddo, circa 1457 BCE, where he defeated a coalition of Canaanite cities. This victory established Egyptian dominance in the region for generations. Thutmose III expanded Egypt's empire to its greatest territorial extent, reaching as far as the Euphrates River in Mesopotamia. His military conquests and diplomatic alliances extended Egyptian influence across the ancient Near East, creating a vast and wealthy empire. The achievements of Thutmose III were immortalized in the walls of the Temple of Karnak, where detailed records of his military campaigns and triumphs were inscribed. These monumental carvings offer a glimpse into the scale and success of his reign. Amenhotep II, the son of Thutmose III, continued his father's military legacy. His reign saw successful campaigns in Nubia and the Levant, but it is his military prowess that stood out. He is famous for his chariotry and for his skill in battle, often personally leading his troops into combat. Under Amenhotep II, Egypt's military and political power reached its zenith. He is often depicted as a heroic figure on monumental statues and temples, reinforcing his divine status and the unyielding strength of Egypt's rule. The reign of Akhenaten, formerly Amenhotep IV, stand out as one of the most unusual and controversial periods in ancient Egyptian history. Akhenaten's religious revolution, where he promoted the worship of Aten, the sun disk, over the traditional polytheistic gods, disrupted the religious and political order of Egypt. Akhenaten founded a new capital city called Akheten, modern-day Amarna, which was dedicated to the worship of Aten. The city's unique and innovative art and architecture broke with centuries of tradition. However, his radical reforms caused significant unrest, and after his death, his successor, Tutankhamun, restored the traditional religious practices. Although Tutankhamun ascended to the throne at a young age, his reign is one of the most famous in Egyptian history. His restoration of the traditional religious practices, following Akhenaten's religious upheavals, was pivotal in re-establishing the power of the priest of Amun. Though Tutankhamun's reign itself was short and largely unremarkable, his tomb's discovery by Howard Carter in 1922 revealed one of the most significant archaeological finds in history. The tomb, filled with treasures and the famous golden mask, offered invaluable insights into Egyptian art, burial practices, and royal life. Perhaps the most legendary of all Egyptian pharaohs, Ramesses II, also known as Ramesses the Great, ruled for 66 years and oversaw an era of unmatched prosperity and military success. His reign is often considered the pinnacle of Egyptian power and glory. Ramesses II is most famous for his military campaigns, especially the Battle of Kadesh, fought against the Hittites in 1274 BCE. While the battle itself was indecisive, Ramesses portrayed it as a resounding victory, and the event became one of the most iconic moments in Egyptian military history. Ramesses II also left an enduring legacy in the form of monumental construction projects. The grand temples of Abu Simbel, carved into the mountainside in Nubia, are among the most awe-inspiring examples of Egyptian architecture. These colossal structures were intended to project Egypt's power and impress foreign nations. Despite the grand accomplishments of Ramesses II and his successors, the new kingdom eventually began to decline. Several factors contributed to this downfall, including military overreach, economic troubles, and political instability. The once mighty empire began to fracture, and Egypt's territorial holdings started to slip away. Egypt faced invasions by the mysterious Sea Peoples, whose attacks weakened Egypt's defenses and contributed to the eventual collapse of the new kingdom. By the time of the 20th dynasty, the once mighty empire had significantly diminished, marking the beginning of Egypt's Third Intermediate Period. Chapter 6. The Third Intermediate Period, the decline of Egypt. After the height of the new kingdom, Egypt entered a phase of fragmentation and decline. The Third Intermediate Period, spanning roughly from 1070 BCE to 664 BCE, was a time of political instability, foreign invasions, and internal strife. While the mighty pharaohs of the new kingdom had created an empire, this era saw Egypt's power and influence steadily erode, giving way to a series of smaller, competing dynasties and external threats. The Third Intermediate Period began with the decline of the new kingdom's centralized power. After the reign of Ramesses XI, the last pharaoh of the 20th dynasty, Egypt's political unity began to crumble. The pharaohs of the New Kingdom had maintained tight control over Egypt's vast territories, but their successors lacked the strength and resources to maintain such a sprawling empire. During this period, Egypt split into several competing regions, each ruled by local dynasties. The high priest of Amun, once a powerful religious and political force during the New Kingdom, began to assert their own power. Thebes, the traditional capital of Egypt, became the center of a priestly dynasty, while other parts of the country were governed by different rulers, including Libyan chiefs and even foreign invaders. The Libyan dynasty, or the 22nd dynasty, is one of the most significant powers of this period. The Libyans, initially serving as mercenaries in the Egyptian army, gradually gained more influence, and by the time of Shishonkai, also known as Shishak, they had taken control of the throne. Shishonkai's reign was marked by military campaigns, most notably his invasion of the Kingdom of Judah. His victory over Jerusalem, as recorded in both the Bible and Egyptian inscriptions, is one of the defining events of his reign. This invasion helped solidify the Libyan dynasty's control over Egypt, but it also signaled a departure from Egypt's previous imperial aspirations. Shishonkai and his successors ruled over divided Egypt, with their power concentrated primarily in the Delta region. The rise of the Libyan dynasty, however, did little to restore the unity and grandeur of Egypt's past. As Egypt's central authority weakened, the high priests of Amun gained considerable power. These priests, particularly those based in Thebes, effectively became rulers of Upper Egypt. Their influence grew as they controlled vast resources, temples, and land, becoming a political force in their own right. Over time, the priesthood became more powerful than the pharaohs themselves. They controlled the wealth of Egypt's religious centers and had a strong influence over military and political matters. The high priests were instrumental in the formation of local dynasties, but this decentralized power structure weakened Egypt's ability to defend itself from external threats. Another significant factor in Egypt's decline was the rise of the kingdom of Kush in Nubia to the south. The Kushites had long been influenced by Egyptian culture, but during the Third Intermediate Period, they began to assert their power. The Nubian king Pir, in 747 BCE, began a series of campaigns that eventually led to the conquest of Egypt. Pir's invasion marked the beginning of the 25th dynasty, often referred to as a Kushite dynasty. The Nubians ruled Egypt for nearly a century, and although they were seen as foreign rulers, they brought stability to Egypt by restoring traditional religious practices and rebuilding temples. Under the Kushites, Egypt experienced a cultural renaissance, with a renewed focus on rebuilding temples and honoring the gods. The Nubian pharaohs, like Shabaka, Shabataka, and Taharka, sought to revive the glory of the Old Kingdom and New Kingdom periods, even though they were still seen as foreign rulers. However, Egypt's revival under the Nubian kings was short-lived. The Assyrians, under powerful rulers like Tiglath-Pileser III and Ashurbanipal, began to expand their empire and set their sights on Egypt. In 674 BCE, the Assyrians defeated the Kushite king Taharka and began to exert control over Egypt. The Assyrian invasion led to the eventual collapse of the Kushite dynasty. The Assyrians installed a series of puppet rulers, beginning with Samtik-I, who would later found the 26th dynasty. The Assyrians' control over Egypt marked the end of the Nubian reign, and a new chapter in Egypt's complex history. Despite the Assyrian influence, Egypt's native rulers began to reassert their power. Samtik-I, the founder of the 26th dynasty, successfully expelled the Assyrians and reunified Egypt in 664 BCE. This marked the beginning of the Late Period, a time when Egypt was once again an independent kingdom, though it remained vulnerable to foreign threats. Samtik-I was an astute ruler who understood the importance of military strength. He employed mercenaries from Greece and other parts of the ancient world to strengthen his army. His reign marked the beginning of a brief revival for Egypt, though the country would remain in a state of flux, constantly caught between local power struggles and foreign invasions. The Third Intermediate Period was a time of great upheaval for Egypt. It was an era of decentralization, foreign invasions, and internal strife. Yet, it also laid the groundwork for the eventual resurgence of Egypt in the Late Period. The period also saw the rise of powerful local dynasties, such as the Libyan dynasty and the Kushites, whose rule would influence Egypt's future. Although Egypt faced numerous challenges during this era, its civilization endured. The legacy of the Third Intermediate Period is one of resilience, as Egypt's people, culture, and religion continued to shape the course of history. The Third Intermediate Period was a time of great change for Egypt, a time when its power waned but its influence never truly disappeared. The country faced numerous challenges, but its cultural and religious traditions continued to influence the ancient world. While Egypt was no longer the dominant empire it once was, the seeds of revival were sown, and the story of Egypt was far from over. Chapter 7. The Late Period, the Resurgence of Egypt. By the end of the Third Intermediate Period, Egypt had been torn apart by foreign invaders, internal strife, and the rise of local dynasties. Yet, as the power of the Assyrians began to wane, a new chapter in Egyptian history began to unfold. The Late Period of Egypt, beginning around 664 BCE with the rise of the Seleucid dynasty, marked a time of recovery, a revival of Egypt's former glory, and a brief period of independence. But even as Egypt sought to reclaim its place among the great civilizations of the ancient world, new threats would emerge on the horizon, leading to the eventual decline and subjugation of the land of the Pharaohs. The Late Period began with the rise of the Seleucid dynasty, founded by Psamtik-I in 664 BCE. Psamtik-I was the first native Egyptian pharaoh to reunify Egypt after the fall of the Kushite dynasty and the Assyrian occupation. His reign marked the beginning of a period of relative stability and prosperity for Egypt, as he worked tirelessly to restore the power of the pharaohs. Psamtik-I was a master of diplomacy and military strategy. One of his first achievements was to expel the Assyrians, who had installed puppet rulers in Egypt. With the help of Greek mercenaries, Psamtik defeated the Assyrian forces and reclaimed Egypt's independence. He also moved Egypt's capital from Thebes to Sais, a city in the Nile Delta, which became the center of Egypt's political and military power during the Seleucid dynasty. Under Psamtik-I and his successors, Egypt experienced an economic and cultural revival. Agriculture, trade, and craftsmanship flourished once again, and Egypt regained a position as a major economic power in the ancient world. The Nile River's fertile banks continued to support agriculture, while Egyptian merchants traded with distant lands, including Greece, Phoenicia, and Mesopotamia. On the cultural front, the Seleucid kings worked to restore Egypt's religious and artistic traditions. Temples and monuments were rebuilt, and the grandeur of the ancient Egyptian civilization began to re-emerge. The Seleucid dynasty sought to revive the glories of Egypt's past, incorporating both old traditions and new influences from the Mediterranean world. The Seleucid period also saw the beginning of the Egyptian revival style and art, which would continue to influence Egyptian culture in the centuries to come. Time of growing resentment among the native Egyptians, who longed for the return of their native rulers. In 404 BCE, Egypt briefly regained its independence under a new native dynasty, the 30th dynasty, founded by Nektanebo-I. This period saw a revival of Egyptian sovereignty, albeit short-lived. Nektanebo-I and his successors worked to restore Egypt's ancient temples, monuments, and religious practices. Nektanebo-I's reign was marked by the rebuilding of many of Egypt's most important religious sites, and he also sought to strengthen Egypt's military. However, the Persian Empire was still a looming threat, and in 343 BCE, the Persians once again invaded Egypt, bringing the 30th dynasty to an end. Despite its eventual decline, the Late Period marked a time of cultural and political resurgence for Egypt. The Seleucid dynasty brought a brief but important period of independence, and the 30th dynasty also contributed to Egypt's final efforts to reclaim its autonomy. Even in the face of foreign domination, Egypt's monuments, temples, and religious traditions endured, leaving an indelible mark on the ancient world. The legacy of the Late Period is one of resilience and a testament to the lasting power of Egypt's civilization, even as it faced conquest by the Persians. The Late Period of Egypt was a time of great change. It was a time when Egypt regained a measure of independence, only to lose it once more to foreign powers. Despite its eventual decline, Egypt's civilization had left a lasting imprint on history. The great monuments, the religious practices, and the wisdom of ancient Egypt would continue to influence cultures around the world, long after the last of the pharaohs had passed from the stage of history. Chapter 8. The Persian Conquest and the Greek Influence. As the final remnants of native Egyptian rule were extinguished, a new and powerful force began to reshape Egypt's destiny. The Persian Empire, which stretched from the Indus River to the shores of the Aegean Sea, set its sights on Egypt. After several decades of Egyptian resistance, Egypt was eventually absorbed into the Persian Empire. But this was not the end of Egypt's story, far from it. The Persian conquest marked the beginning of a profound period of foreign influence, one that would see Egypt become the playground of not just Persians, but Greeks, leading to the rise of one of Egypt's most famous dynasties, the Ptolemies. The Persian conquest of Egypt began in 525 BC under Cambyses II, the son of Cyrus the Great. After a series of internal conflicts and foreign incursions, Egypt, weakened and fractured, fell to the Persians. The decisive Battle of Pelusium, fought on the eastern borders of the Nile Delta, marked the beginning of Persia's domination. After the defeat of the last Scythic king, Psamtik III, Egypt was incorporated into the Persian Empire, and Memphis, the traditional heart of Egyptian power, fell under Persian control. Cambyses II quickly asserted his dominance, claiming himself as a ruler of Egypt and instituting the Persian satrapy system, where the Egyptian throne was no longer held by native kings, but by Persian-appointed governors. The Persians, though politically controlling, were generally respectful of Egypt's religious customs and monuments. They allowed the Egyptian priests to continue overseeing religious rituals and even funded the repair and maintenance of many Egyptian temples that had fallen into disrepair. But despite the religious tolerance, Egypt's political independence was shattered, and the kingdom was now ruled from afar by Persian satraps. Under Persian rule, Egypt's political and cultural autonomy was gradually stripped away. Though the Persians allowed a degree of local governance, many Egyptians, particularly the priesthood and military elite, grew disillusioned with foreign rule. Several revolts erupted, particularly under the reigns of Persian kings like Darius I and Xerxes I, who, though tolerant, were seen by many Egyptians as foreign oppressors. One of the most significant uprisings occurred during the reign of Darius I in 522 BCE. The Egyptian priesthood, who held considerable influence over the people, led a rebellion in the region of Thebes. This revolt was brutally suppressed by Persian forces, but it reflected the deep dissatisfaction with Persian domination. While the Persians maintained the essential structure of Egyptian religion, their rule wasn't without its disruptions. Some Egyptian temples were repurposed for Persian religious ceremonies, and Egyptian temples such as the ones in Karnak, though still standing, underwent changes that reflected Persian religious influences. Despite the persistent discontent under Persian rule, Egypt would not remain under Persian domination indefinitely. In 404 BCE, the Persian Empire briefly lost control of Egypt when the satraps were ousted in a revolt led by local Egyptian rulers, most notably Nectanebo I, who established the 30th dynasty. Nectanebo I led a series of reforms that focused on reviving Egypt's military and religious traditions. Under his leadership, Egypt saw a brief renaissance in both the arts and architecture, with the construction of temples, such as the Temple of Isis at Philae. His reign, however, was short-lived, and by 343 BCE, the Persians, under Artaxerxes III, launched a campaign that led to Egypt's reconquest. The brief moment of Egyptian independence was crushed under the might of Persian forces. Once again, Egypt fell under control of the Persian Empire, and the country was once again subjugated, marking the end of the native Egyptian dynasty. As Egypt once again became a Persian satrapy, a new foreign influence began to take shape along Egypt's Mediterranean coast. The Greeks, who had long traded with Egypt, began to exert greater influence over the country's culture and politics. By the 4th century BCE, Greek settlers established themselves along Egypt's Mediterranean coast, founding the city of Alexandria in 331 BCE. Under the leadership of Alexander the Great, Egypt was drawn into the orbit of Greek civilization. Alexander, having conquered the Persian Empire, entered Egypt as a liberator, and the Egyptians hailed him as a pharaoh. One of the defining moments of Alexander's conquest of Egypt was his visit to the Oracle of Siwa in the western desert. Here, Alexander was declared the son of the god Amun, cementing his status as a legitimate ruler of Egypt. His coronation not only marked a political victory, but also symbolized the beginning of a new era for Egypt, a fusion of Greek and Egyptian cultures that would shape the Ptolemaic dynasty. After Alexander's death in 323 BC, his vast empire was divided among his generals. Egypt was given to Ptolemy I Sota, one of Alexander's trusted generals, who established the Ptolemaic dynasty. The Ptolemies, though of Greek origin, ruled Egypt for nearly 3 centuries, from 305 BCE to 30 BCE. The Ptolemaic dynasty marked a time of profound cultural fusion. The Ptolemies sought to blend Greek and Egyptian traditions, creating a unique and vibrant cultural milieu. Greek became the language of the elite and government, but the Ptolemies also adopted the title of pharaoh, and they continued to promote Egyptian religious traditions. One of the most enduring legacies of the Ptolemaic period was the Library of Alexandria, which became the intellectual heart of the ancient world. Scholars from all over the Mediterranean came to Alexandria, contributing to the fields of mathematics, astronomy, philosophy, and medicine. Although the Persians had exerted control over Egypt for nearly 2 centuries, their rule eventually came to an end with the rise of Alexander the Great. The Persian influence, once dominant, was replaced by the Greek Hellenistic culture, bringing with it a new age of exploration, knowledge, and cultural blending. But the shadows of the Persian Empire remained, and their brief rule had lasting effects on Egypt's identity and its place in the world. With the Persian Empire's loss of Egypt, the stage was set for the rise of the Ptolemies, Greek rulers who would forever change the course of Egypt's history. Though Egypt would never fully recover its former independence, its cultural legacy, enriched by Greek and Persian influences, would endure in ways that shaped the ancient world for centuries to come. Closing, the enduring legacy of ancient Egypt. As the mighty civilization of ancient Egypt fades into the pages of history, its story is far from over. The tombs, temples, and monuments that have withstood the ravages of time serve as eternal symbols of Egypt's grandeur and enduring legacy. From the towering pyramids of Giza to the sacred banks of the Nile, Egypt's civilization continues to echo through the millennia, influencing the world in profound and lasting ways. Though Egypt's political power waned and its native culture was gradually blended with foreign influences, its intellectual, spiritual, and artistic contributions remain a cornerstone of human civilization. The Egyptians' understanding of mathematics, astronomy, and medicine laid the foundation for countless advancements. Their monumental architecture, from the awe-inspiring pyramids to the majestic temples, continues to capture the imagination of all who see it. Through the discovery of the Rosetta Stone, modern scholars have unlocked the secrets of the Egyptian language, allowing us to read the ancient texts that reveal their beliefs, wisdom, and daily lives. These writings give us insight into their complex mythology, their reverence for the gods, and their deep connection to the cycles of the natural world. In these ancient words, we still find echoes of Egypt's moral philosophy, their ideals of justice, and their vision of eternity. Today, Egypt continues to captivate the world with its mystique. Its legacy lives on in the hearts of the millions who visit the Nile, the pyramids, and the temples, and who study the wisdom passed down through the ages. The art, the science, the philosophies, and the religions that flourish in ancient Egypt have influenced the course of human history, from the civilizations that arose in Greece and Rome to the Islamic Golden Age, and beyond. And though Egypt's political power may have faded, its cultural and spiritual influence endures, immortalized in the symbols of the gods, the stories of pharaohs, and the knowledge passed down across centuries. Ancient Egypt, with its remarkable achievements, continues to inspire awe, curiosity, and respect, reminding us of the power of human creativity, ingenuity, and resilience. The civilization of Egypt may have been born in the cradle of the Nile, but its legacy spans the globe and will continue to inspire future generations for millennia to come. In the end, Egypt is not just a place in the past, but a beacon that lights the path of human history, its brilliance undiminished by the passage of time.